Okay, hello everyone. All right, so I think we can start.
Yeah, I think we can
Um,
start.
yes, so good morning to all in Europe, and good afternoon and evening to all in Asia Pacific, and very early morning to some in the US. I am delighted to be part of this Hyperledger special panel. As speaker today, let me introduce you firstly Chen, who leads the Hyperledger Climate Accounting and Certification Working Group. As president of Open Source Strategy, he has created the OpenTAPS open source ERP plus CRM and Start Energy application suites for managing green energy projects. He is also a former fund manager and the co-founder of the e-commerce site graciousstyle.com. Then we also have with us Robin, who is currently the co-chair of the Hyperledger Climate Action and Accounting SIG, which supports the development of an open global climate accounting system. Currently, he is earning his PhD at the Institute of Internet Security of the Westphalian University of Applied Science and actively contributing to various open source projects such as Hyperledger Indy and Hyperledger Lab Blockchain Carbon Accounting. We are also with Kamlesh, who is one of the top 30 blockchain influencers of India, according to the Singapore FinTech News. He has 11 years of experience in software development and IT consulting in supply chain management, trade finance, and travel and transportation solution, and more than five years experience in blockchain and Hyperledger technologies. Also, he is the co-lead of the Hyperledger India chapter and an active contributor in Hyperledger Healthcare, Telecom SIG, Identity Working Group, Education, and Climate Action Group in the Hyperledger community. Then, my name is Karolina Gorna, and I am the president of KRYPTOSPHERE, the first French student association specialized in blockchain and new technology. I am currently enrolled in a master program at Telecom Sud Paris Institut Polytechnique de Paris. I am also the local lead of the NASA Space App Challenge in Paris, and I'm taking part in the Open Climate Collaborathon initialized by Hyperledger since November 2019, and I am currently contributing to several Hyperledger Arias and Indie projects. Next slide, please, Robin. So the flow for today is that we will do an overview of the India, US, and European ecosystem to see how the blockchain is helping to achieve the sustainable goal development. The overreaching goal for all of us is to manage the world's single planetary carbon budget and realize the Paris Agreement. For the next slides, Kamlesh, the floor is yours. Kamlesh, you're muted. Yeah.
Now it's fine. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Karolina, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. So, sustainable development goals, we everyone know, and we everyone know the importance of the climate change and climate environment things. So, in this talk, we're going to present India, Europe, and US specific initiatives in the climate actions and SDGs. So, here I'm talking about the India perspective. So, India is committed to achieve the 17 SDG goals, and Niti Aayog, uh, which is the government arm of the think tank of the Indian government, who monitor and overseeing the implementation of SDGs across the country. And in the current trends, like recently the overall SDG ranking in India, which is really improved, uh, 66 to 20, 66 to 66 in just 2 years, and not just the government and regulatory environments, even the private corporate and companies are also becoming net zero. So recently, the Infosys, which is a IT company in India, recently become the net zero in 2020, which is well before the global 2020 timeline. Next slides. Okay, so now how blockchain is helping to achieve the SDG goals. So SDG is there are 17 SDG goals, and in they meet no poverty, hunger, supply chain, uh, kind of climate change, environmental changes. So all this. So blockchain could help to achieve different sectors initiatives. So, for example, there's Tata Steel, which is a biggest steel manufacturer in India, and they partnered with kind of joined the consortium of World Economic Forum with along with six different steel manufacturers and kind of helping to track the carbon emission of their manufacturing process. Also, the Statvic, which is a tracking the vaccine distribution across the India even before the COVID-19 vaccines, and which is part of the UNICEF Innovation Fund to track the COVID vaccines. Next slides. So, other than this supply chain, and there are other sector like renewable energy, solar power distribution, and even the kind of skill certificate to the poor people in the work in the people who are working in the real estate sector where there is no education kind of things. And P2P energy trading projects, which is where the national blockchain strategy, which recently come out from the Indian government, they're also focusing on the peer-to-peer energy trading based on the blockchain-based systems. And we are also working with the few customers to in the renewable sector to kind of create their energy distribution system powered by blockchain, and even calculating the carbon emission and carbon offset, and then kind of tokenizing those carbon offset. And also in India, a couple of startups are kind of providing opportunity to invest in the clean and green assets. Like for example, there is a one Paise, which is a startup with a Hyperledger fabric powered blockchain platform. It's provide you platform to invest in the solar energy, wind energy platforms, and give you some kind of tokenize uh, your investment. Next slides. So circular economy is very important and plays a very vital role in the any kind of SDG goals achievement. And there are various initiative when the companies are working in the waste management, end-to-end food traceability, or improving the sustainable supply chain, low carbon supply chain. And the EPR, which is a very broad term nowadays in the waste management companies, like extended producer responsibility. So where the companies have a responsibility to recycle the plastic or recycle the e-waste which they are producing during their product cycle, and try to reuse these recycled products, recycle material in their uh, new supply chain. And and now this is mandated by the regulator or the government to fulfill their EPR goals. And blockchain plays very important role to track and trace this EPR and the waste management cycles. And in the Indian companies, many waste management companies are adopting blockchain and working. We are currently working with a couple of few customers to implement their waste management and EPR goals, which is blockchain powered. And there are a couple of investment fund focusing on the waste management and recycling industry. Next slides. So, other than circular economy and the renewable energy sector, there are various sectors where blockchain could apply to combat the climate change and climate actions, like applying blockchain to climate action in agriculture, like where you can apply the blockchain to kind of track say, the agri value chain, and like what kind of pesticide being used, whether you are using the organic farming or non-organic farming, carbon accounting and carbon credit tokenization in the waste management, even renewable energy sectors, uh, low carbon supply chain, plastic recycle, EPR implementation, and kind of issuing the renewable energy certificate, because this is mandated by the government and regulator to offset anyhow your carbon emission and kind of reduce your carbon footprint to your products, and peer-to-peer trading of the solar energies. So next slides. So I will just say the two different stories in the different segment. One is from the government sector, where the one of the state governments are working with the India Smart Grid Forum and the Power Ministry of India to use the renewable energy platform for solar power distribution in the one of the state government, and which is very interesting, I think, because in the still in India, like trading the electricity is not the kind of easily like we do in the US and Europe sector. But the with the Ministry of Power and the India Smart Grid Farmer, this is being implemented on the blockchain based system. So this is one government one. Next slide. So yeah, so not just the government, even the corporate sector, private sector taking their responsibility and kind of trying to implement the blockchain based system, or kind of anyhow want to implement their sustainable development goal. Like for example, the Aditya Birla Group, which is a very large conglomerate in India, which work in different sectors. So one of the sector there is a their fashion and retail, and they have their Birla Cellulose, which is a kind of organic forest to forest kind of fiber, and they are tracking their end-to-end supply chain from forest to till fashion industry, kind of circular supply chain, and kind of using these two different approaches. One is kind of integrating their supply chain from forest to fashion supply chain, and another is kind of calculating the carbon footprint of their products which are available in their retail stores. So this is kind of shows the importance of the Indian government and the Indian corporate sector to achieve the sustainable developments, and how blockchain is helping to achieve it. So now I will hand over to Robin, who will talk about the Europe uh, SDG goals. Over to
Yeah,
you.
thanks, Kamlesh. Before we talk about Europe, we'll talk about USA perspective. Chen made a recording for us. He's not able to attend the meeting because it's around about 2 a.m. at Pacific time. So we're gonna play the recording to you, and you're able to post your sessions to the Q&A, and Chen will answer them after the presentation to the mailing list of the Hyperledger Climate Action Counting group.
Chen, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in climate in the United States and the opportunities for blockchain. So what you've probably read is that we have a new president who's introduced a lot of climate initiatives in Congress, and there's been some spirited, let's say, political debate about those. And what you may not have read is about all the state and local government initiatives that are actually already taking place, as well as initiatives from major corporations and investors, and even the oil and gas industry here. So I'd like to tell you about those. So the state and local governments in the United States have in fact been doing a lot on climate, even during the last decade. For example, 8 states, District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, now have 100% clean energy goals. The majority of the states have some renewable energy standards already. The state of California, which is the 5th largest economy in the world, has mandated electric vehicles by 2035 in the whole state, and heavy-duty transport vehicles must all be electric by 2045. It's also requiring that all new residential buildings be net zero energy. In other words, using on-site solar or renewables to offset all the buildings' internal energy in 2020. So that's already started. And all commercial buildings and all major upgrades of buildings reach that goal in 2030. So just by its size, California is basically pushing the United States, if not the whole world, towards electric vehicles. And also New York City, which is the 10th largest economy in the world, surprisingly, has enacted a lot of climate legislation, specifically Local Law 97, which is really important because it covers 60% of the buildings in New York City, and it's requiring that they all reduce emissions by 40% versus 2005 levels within the next decade. So that's creating, along with California's laws, a lot more focus on making our building sector, our largest source of emissions in the United States, more energy efficient. The opportunities for the blockchain is to make data collection more efficient so that these kinds of mandates are easier to implement, and we could engage the private sector to do something positive without burdening them with undue regulation and red tape, and also help scale these up across more municipalities in the country. Meanwhile, some of the largest companies and investors in the United States have also committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. BlackRock, one of the largest fund managers in the world, it has been calling on all the companies it invests in to do something about climate. Microsoft has committed to be carbon negative, not just carbon neutral, but actually removing all of its historical carbon by 2030 through both internal measures and purchases of carbon offsets. And these are just some of the examples of what's been happening in this area. For these companies, what we could help with is measuring greenhouse gas emissions, especially scope 3 or supply chain emissions of all the products that they purchase and transport. Improving the transparency and quality of carbon offsets, which right now has a lot of issues with transparency of pricing and also actual quality of whether the offsets are reducing emissions as they're claiming to. And finally, improving consumer engagement so that companies who take these initiatives feel like they are getting a return, that their customers are buying in. And finally, there's been a lot of change in the oil and gas industry, one of the big parts of our economy here. With the carbon capture and sequestration technology, we're now able to capture carbon emissions at the point of use, for example, major power plants, and then store them back into oil fields and geologic formations for a very long time. There's now bipartisan support for that major piece of legislation called the SCALE Act in the federal government, and federal tax support for carbon capture and sequestration. And you may have read also Exxon, through its institutional investors vote, is now going to have on its board several people who are going to be focused on the climate issue. So this industry is changing, and what they could use help with through the blockchain is, one, proving that the emissions reductions, emissions captured is real, and second, to track the emissions reductions and the local carbon fuels through their supply chains. So those are some of the interesting things that you may not have heard about that's happening in the United States. And if you have questions, please put them on the chat and then come back to our Climate SIG mailing list and I'll answer them for you there. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we're going to talk about the European perspective. I represent the European Green Deal and
Chen,
the Circular Economy Action Plan of the European Commission. In December 2019, the European Commission presented the European Green Deal, which is basically a roadmap for the EU to become sustainable and climate neutral by 2025. On this slide, you can see 4 different fields of this Green Deal. The first one is the energy system. The goal is to decarbonize the current energy system that accounts for more than 75% of the EU's greenhouse gas emissions. 40% of the energy is consumed by buildings. To lower this rate, the Green Deal proposes also to renovate buildings and thereby cut people's energy bills and usage. Further, the Green Deal aims to support the industry. It wants European companies to become leaders in green technology. And if you take a look at the percentage of recycled materials that are currently used, you see that there's plenty of room for innovation. Also, the European Green Deal focuses on the transport sector. It wants to roll out cleaner, healthier and cheaper forms of private and public transport. In general, you can say in Europe that half of the total greenhouse gas emissions come from either resource extraction or resource processing. So it is not possible to achieve the climate neutrality target by 2050 without transitioning to a fully circular economy, which I'm going to talk about on the next slide. The Circular Economy Action Plan announces initiatives for the entire life cycle of products. That means from design and manufacturing to the consumption, like the actual use of the products, to repair, reuse, and recycling, and finally bringing back resources into the economy. The aim of the action plan is to reduce the consumption footprint and to double the EU's circular material use rate in the actual decade where we're living in from 2020 to 2030. To do so, the European Commission wants to make sustainable products that last and wants to enable all citizens to take full part in a circular economy. When I was reading this for the first time, I asked myself, how can I take full part in the economy without any reliable data about sustainability and circularity of products? It also kind of remembered me on a quote by Peter Trager that says, "You can manage what you can measure." So imagine the following scenario. You want to buy a new pair of sneakers, so you go on a shopping trip. You enter the store, and in front of you, there's a wall full of sneakers in all colors, all shapes, price ranges, and sizes. So now you want to take your role in the circular economy and make an informed decision that's in line with the circular economy action plan of the European Union. Do you feel comfortable to make an informed decision? I mean, I had this experience last week, and actually I wasn't informed at all. I think that there's a huge lack in the current system of data. It's very intransparent, and I think there is a great opportunity for blockchain technology to solve these issues. A distributed ledger could provide and maintain the data we need to close the loop. In terms of a circular economy, or in terms of the sneakers, I can think of maybe the carbon footprint of the pair of sneakers, or a resource footprint, maybe also the amount of water used in production, or the percentage of recycled materials. Those are all opportunities, and blockchain can help to provide and gather this information. And in general, the Circular Economy Action Plan focuses on sectors that use the most resources and also have a high potential for circularity. Batteries are actually one of those areas and resources. These sustainable batteries for a circular economy, a circular and climate neutral economy proposal of the European Union says that batteries placed in the European Union should become sustainable, high-performing, and safe all along their life cycle. According to the proposal, the content of recycled materials and collection, treatment, and recycling of batteries at the end of life will get new requirements. So an example is the collection rate. The current collection rate of batteries is around about 45%. That was in 2020. And the goal is to increase this collection rate to 65% in 2025 and 70% in 2030. This law will come in force on January the 1st in 2022. 2.5 years later, it's July 2024. From there on, only rechargeable industrial and electric vehicle batteries for which a carbon footprint declaration has been established can be placed on the market. So we have to measure the collection recycling rate of batteries, and also we have to provide a carbon footprint declaration for each battery. I think this will only be possible if batteries will be identified, if batteries get an identity. A blockchain-based battery passport can be the solution. Just think of a digital identity that connects the battery and its critical parts with the Internet of Things, stored on a blockchain. This will increase the transparency of the overall battery market and enable traceability of, it will start with large batteries throughout their entire life cycle. Thereby, as for example, as a car manufacturer, you're now able to track and report the lifetime journey of each vehicle and battery, and thereby demonstrate its sustainability. With this battery passport, you will be able to say at the end of life of a battery whether batteries have been responsibly managed or not. Karolina will now continue in the next slide and discuss the sustainability DAO.
Thank you, Robin. So we have covered the India, the US, and the European ecosystem, but it's also important to say that there are projects that have been developed which are multi-continental and which include a different working group. And the Sustainability DAO it is an example of a project that has been developed and that is currently being implemented thanks to the Hyperledger working group SIG. And the idea of the Sustainability DAO is to enable the consumer to give its opinion on the product and then to create a score with variables that have been established in a formula. And the idea is to share this sustainability score with the industry and to make the market change and the product evolve thanks to this vision of the consumer, and to enable them to have a bigger impact on what they are buying, and to make the whole ecosystem change. So these kind of projects are really inspiring, and you can also get involved by joining the Hyperledger SIG session that Robin will describe quickly for the end of this panel.
Yes. So thanks, Karolina. So this was our presentation. Thanks everybody for joining. We are all part of the Hyperledger Climate Action and Accounting Special Interest Group and are working to make a global climate accounting system reality. We're an open source group with a community of talented students and professionals all over the world, and everyone is welcome to join. Our next call will be on Tuesday, June 15 at 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll drop the information to the chat, and yes, please post your questions to the Q&A, and we hope to answer at least one or two of them. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Robin. Thanks, Kamlesh. We have one question to end this session. Feel free to answer. So it's a question from Inbal. Can blockchain help companies with a better CSR goal reporting? So the CSR is the corporate social responsibility score. So can anyone answer this question?
Yeah, I think I can take this one. So huge companies, I think in Europe it's about 500 employees, or maybe it's even more, are by law kind of forced to report on their social and responsibilities. And at the moment, it is like a very manual effort to gather all the information. If you think of a blockchain-based system, and maybe you're a manufacturer and you go all down your supply chain, and now if different suppliers also use this blockchain technology to maybe provide information about the carbon footprint of their products or working conditions, and if this is stored immutably and audited on a blockchain and it has an identity, then you could just use this as a proof for your own CSR report. So you could use the proof of your suppliers as your own proof. I hope this makes it kind of clear. And Kamlesh or Karolina, if you want to elaborate on this.
Yeah, so I can add, for example, like that extended producer responsibility, which is also the kind of responsibility of brand to kind of prove like how much plastic or any waste they are reprocessing. So similarly, we could do any kind of CSR tracking on the blockchain. So just we need the trust and transparency on the platform. And if CSR needs that kind of reporting, then obviously we can implement the blockchain there.
Great. Thank you, Kamlesh. Thank you, Robin, for this answer. We hope that we have given a few outputs to all of you. And we will now end this panel. It was been a really good moment for everyone. So thank you for having joined us today. And we hope to see you on the next Hyperledger SIG session. And thank you all. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Kamlesh. And have a good day at the Hyperledger Global Forum. Goodbye, everyone.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Thanks and goodbye.